A lot of people think crypto regulation happens in one big moment. A ban, a law, a switch getting flipped. But that's actually not how it works. What happens is much quieter. First, the rules get written, then behaviour starts to change, and only much later do people realise the game they're playing isn't the same one anymore. That is where we are in the UK right now. Not at the end of the story, but not at the beginning either. We're in the middle, the part that doesn't make headlines, but decides who survives, who gets access, and who gets left behind. And January 2026 matters because this is the point where crypto in the UK stops being treated like an experiment and starts being treated as financial infrastructure. Most people think nothing's changed, but companies are already making decisions. Banks are already positioning, and regulators are already acting as if the outcome is inevitable. This video is about that moment, what the UK has already decided, why it's happening now, not later, and what it means if you're building in crypto, investing in it, or simply holding it here in the UK. Because by the time this shift becomes obvious, the important choices have already been made. If you're new here, I'm Paula. And on this channel, we don't chase hype or headlines. We break down how markets, money, and systems actually work, so you can think clearly while everyone else is reacting emotionally. And this topic is exactly one of those moments where understanding structure matters more than reaction. To understand why January 2026 matters, we need to rewind slightly. Back in October 2023, the UK government, through Treasury, published a full policy framework for crypto assets. Not guidance, not consultation noise, a framework. That framework answered one very simple but very powerful question. What is crypto legally in the UK? And the answer was clear. Crypto would no longer sit in a grey area. It would be treated as a financial activity brought inside the same legal parameter that governs banks, brokers, and markets. At the same time, most people shrugged. There was no ban, no price reaction, no enforcement headline. So the assumption was, nothing's changed. But this is where people misunderstood how regulation actually works. Markets don't move when the rules start, they move when the rules are written. Because once a framework exists, behaviour changes long before enforcement ever arrives. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. Between 2023 and 2025, that original framework was quietly turned into draft legislation. Statutory instruments were prepared, responsibilities were clarified, timelines were locked in. And as we moved into late 2025 and now January 2026, something changed. Crypto firms stopped asking, will we need authorization? And started asking, can we survive authorization? That's the inflection point. Because 2026 is the final full year before the serious run-up to full enforcement in 2027. And in regulatory terms, this isn't early. This is the moment where companies have to commit or quietly exit. Because if you wait too long, you don't get authorised, you get excluded. Let me slow this down, because the word framework can sound abstract. The UK hasn't invented a brand new crypto rulebook. What it's done is map crypto into an existing financial system. That system already exists. It governs banks, payment firms, brokers, markets. Crypto isn't being treated as a special internet experiment. It's being treated as financial plumbing. And the framework doesn't focus on the token, it focuses on the activity. If you operate a platform where people trade crypto, that's a regulated market activity. If you hold crypto on behalf of customers, that's custody. If you facilitate payments using crypto or stablecoins, that's a payment service. If you intermediate or settle transactions, that's infrastructure. Once those activities are defined, everything else flows. Authorization, governance, controls, accountability. Not because crypto is dangerous, but because plumbing is never left unsupervised. That's the core of the framework. It doesn't care about memes. It doesn't predict price. It decides where crypto fits. This is also why waiting for the go live date misses the point. Once a framework exists, firms don't wait for enforcement to adapt. They have to build systems that will pass scrutiny years in advance. That means platforms adjusting what they offer UK users, exchanges reviewing custody and withdrawal models, compliance becoming more visible, not less. And in some cases, firms quietly deciding the UK isn't worth it anymore. Nothing dramatic happens overnight, but the shape of the UK crypto market is already being set. That's why this matters now. This brings us to something people complain about constantly. You'll hear people say, FCA approval is basically impossible. And in a sense, that's true, but not for the reason people think. The Financial Conduct Authority isn't there to help companies move fast. It's there to protect the system. Its mindset isn't innovative. It's what breaks if this fails. That thinking comes from history. From the 2008 financial crisis, from the mis-selling scandals, from the systematic bank failures. So when crypto asks to be treated like financial infrastructure, the FCA applies the same lens. That's why approval is slow, why it's expensive, why it demands governance, documentation, audits, and names individuals who are personally accountable. Not because the UK hates crypto, but because it treats anything touching money, payments, or custody as critical infrastructure. This leads into a deeper issue people feel instinctively. The UK used to be seen as a global financial hub. London was open, flexible, innovative, international. And over the last decade, that perception has shifted. Brexit, regulatory caution, talent leaving, firms choosing other jurisdictions. So when people see heavy crypto regulation, they don't just see consumer protection. They see another signal that the UK might be becoming slower, more defensive, less competitive. That concern isn't irrational. But here's the nuance. The UK isn't trying to be the fastest crypto jurisdiction. It's trying to be the most trusted. And those are very different strategies. This isn't about being a playground. It's about being a place where large amounts of capital feel safe operating for decades. That's a slower game, and it explains a lot of what we're seeing. This is also why stablecoins matter so much. They're not just another crypto product. They sit at the intersection of money, payments, and settlement. Most crypto assets are speculative. Stablecoins are functional. They move value, they clear transactions, they connect systems. They answer a very old financial question. How do we move money efficiently without rebuilding everything? That is why regulators care. And here's the part that most people miss. Why sterling-based stablecoins? Why not just let everything run on dollars? Because money isn't neutral. If payments, settlements, and liquidity all run on USD stablecoins, influence shifts with it. Sterling-based stablecoins are about monetary relevance. They allow UK-based digital payments, domestic settlement on modern rails, innovation without dollar dependence. This isn't crypto hype. It's sovereignty, resilience, and control. That's why regulators are willing to engage here. Now we get to the uncomfortable question. This framework doesn't affect everyone equally. Large, well-capitalized players like Ripple can absorb regulation. They have legal teams, compliance budgets, time. For them, regulation is a moat. Once they're authorised, competition thins out. But for small innovators, the same rules can be suffocating. Legal costs alone can kill a project before it launches. So the real question is, can the UK be both a home for credibility and innovation? The honest answer is complicated. Heavy regulation always favours incumbents. That's true in banking, insurance, telecoms, everything. The UK is trying to soften that with regulatory sandboxes and staged authorisation. But whether that works in practice is still an open question. If the bar is too high, innovation leaves. If the bar is too low, trust collapses. Getting that balance right is incredibly difficult. So what does it really mean for normal UK crypto holders? Nothing dramatic. You're not banned, you're not being forced out, but things are tightening. More checks, more disclosures, fewer high-risk offers. Regulation doesn't remove risk, it removes opacity. Crypto remains volatile, markets remain cyclical. but the system becomes more supervised. And this is where self-custody becomes clearer, not rebellious. As platforms become more regulated and permissioned, people naturally ask, do I accept counterparty risk, or do I take responsibility myself? When you hold assets on an exchange, you're exposed to platform risk, freezes, outages, policy changes. Self-custody removes that layer, but only if it's done properly. And that's why I'm careful with recommendations. Personally, I use Tangem. It's simple, secure, and designed for real ownership without technical complexity. No cables, no USBs, no seed phrases written down on scraps of paper. And I only recommend tools I use myself. I've negotiated a discount with Tangem especially for my community. So on top of any discounts already on their website, you can use my code Paula for an extra 10% off. The link is in the description. Self-custody isn't mandatory, but as regulation increases, understanding that choice becomes more important, not less. This was never a price story. Structural shifts don't move markets overnight. They change who's allowed to participate. And that shows up later in liquidity, access, and volatility. So why January 2026? Because this is when behaviour changes. Firms commit capital, institutions allocate budgets, platforms redesign products. Retail's still thinking nothing's happening. But by the time it feels real, the decisions are already locked in. This is how financial systems mature. Messy edges, clear cores, a slow shift from speculation to infrastructure. The people who struggle react emotionally. The people who do well understand structure. And this is exactly why I always say this. If you're investing in risk assets, you need a framework, not vibes, not predictions. Understanding how liquidity moves, how macro pressure transmits, how regulation shapes access over time. That's why we've built the Crypto Liftoff course. And if you want to know the exact strategies we use to make money in both the bull market and the bear market, the Crypto Liftoff course is completely free for you. The link is in the description below. And if you want to be part of a community where normal people talk about markets, macro and structure, not hype, that's exactly why we've built the Crypto Wolfpack. If this video helped you think more clearly, give it a like, subscribe for more system level breakdowns. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.